LC, good morning Facebook. We're so glad that you clicked on this video and that you are joining us once again for our devotional times here. I do a pretty good job with my actions. Now the Lord still works on my heart and shows me everything that needs to be changed and adjusted to reflect more of Him, but where I really get caught is not always in my day-to-day actions, but it's in my reactions. And I found a couple of scriptures that I want to share with you this morning of some folks in the Bible that had similar reaction that I have had with the Lord lately. The first is in Jonah. It's chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. Now, we had a devotional a few weeks ago from Ashley Smith on Jonah, and that was absolutely wonderful. But in verses 2 and 3, it says that this is after after the city of Nineveh has been saved. Jonah prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? This is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." That's not exactly the reaction that you would think when a prophet has been sent and an entire city has been saved. But that's where Jonah was in his heart. He didn't want them to be saved. He thought they deserved damnation, and he was mad at God for forgiving them. What he wanted is not what happened. The second verse I want to bring your attention to this morning is in Luke chapter 15. This is verses 29 and 30. This is part of the prodigal son story. And after he has come home and the father is celebrating, this is the older brother's reaction. He answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him." So again, not celebrating what God has done in the life of his brother, but judgment, and he would have wanted something different. So what God showed me here is that when we nurse our own desire, that's toxic, and it robs us of experiencing God's fullness of joy. Jonah being angry at God did not stop the Ninevites from coming to know the Lord. The older brother's anger didn't stop the younger brother's restoration and being celebrated on his return home. These two men only held themselves back from where God was and what he was doing. It didn't void their sonship. God reached out to Jonah through the metaphor of the plant, and the father still invited his eldest son to join in the celebration. But because of the toxicity in their hearts towards what was happening, they held themselves back. So what's the right way to react? How do we process disappointment without allowing toxicity to come in? Well, there's a story in John 11 when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And the whole story takes place in verses 1 through 14. But I want to share with you some specific verses out of that passage. So at this point, Lazarus has been dead and buried. His sisters sent for Jesus while Lazarus was still alive. They're mourning now, but still waiting for Jesus to show up. What an opportunity to be disappointed and even angry at God. And the sisters are honest with Jesus about how they feel. We find that in John 11, verse 21, and again in verse 32. Both sisters say, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not be dead." Notice the difference. Where Jonah and the older brother demanded that God or the Father should have done things their way because of their own righteousness, because of their own merit, Mary and Martha still speak from a place of honor and faith. Martha says in John 11, verse 22, "But even now, I know that whatever you ask, God will give you." So because their attitude is still in right standing with Jesus, he's able to mourn with them. And this, I believe, is the key. Toxicity in our hearts isn't tied to one particular thing that we want. It's an overall state, and the disappointment is the trigger that reveals the state of our heart, reveals the attitude that we have towards God. Mary and Martha did not bargain with Jesus. They weren't pouting or attempting to force him to do things their way. If in our disappointment and hurt, we choose pride and anger, and we say that we know better than God, then we're not in a position to hear his comfort or even value his presence. He then has to correct us to restore our hearts before we can hear the truth. In John 11, verse 40, we see the heart of God through the words of Jesus. He says, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" The glory of God is the revival of 600,000 people who were famously wicked. The glory of God is in the restoration of a son to his father. And the glory of God is in the resurrection of what was dead and buried. So this morning, I want to leave you with this thought and this challenge. When Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb, he spoke to the burial shroud and said, "Loose him and let him go." Jesus sees you in your tomb today, and he wants to set you free. What toxic attitudes are you nursing, even though they don't line up with the will of God? Where is your heart out of alignment, angry, trying to force its own way? Ask God to reveal that to you this morning, and as he identifies it, I encourage you, have faith and give it over to God. He's resurrecting the dead places in your heart this morning. He's telling your burial shroud to let you go. Now, with a free heart, you can experience the joy and the fullness that God has for you. Thank you, DLC, for joining us. Have a blessed and wonderful day.